Everyone, my name is Francisco Escobar, and I'm the host of this show, Conversamos. We are sharing an exclusive Season 3 episode. Get ready as we have a great panelist across the U.S. political aisle to discuss the upcoming U.S. presidential election. All here as Latin Entertainment presents Conversamos.
Yo, is it that wrong? I'm making a song, I'm taking it back for the platform that I formed. You should help me transform. I run the reservoir, the predator, like a hungry carnivore when I'm breaking through these heavy.
Now, let me introduce you to our panel. We have Freddie S., Edna T. from Aztec Radio, Yadira S. from COLOR, and Julio Delgado. Thank you all for joining us. And now with our first question, what are the most important issues to you when voting for a political candidate?
When voting for a political candidate, the things that I find most important has a lot to do with economics of our nation. I feel like, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative because I feel like the free market is a way to empower communities. It's just, as of recently, I've noticed that there's a lot of individuals who feel like, we should be more left, but I chose Joe Biden as a possible individual that I'll possibly vote for because I feel like he is truly like a conservative. Like he's a conservative that I grew up with. He's the conservative that I'm more familiar with. So it has a lot to do with business and the economics. But also immigration. I believe wholeheartedly that the United States has a lot of immigrants that have contributed positively to us, and there has to be a way to find a balance between, legal immigration or illegal immigration. I feel like we need to get together as a community and figure out a way to uplift each other instead of demonizing each other over things like status. So those are my two, things that I vote for is, immigration policies as well as the right of focused small businesses, not corporate businesses, but small businesses.
For me, it is more policies than personality. So in a sense of, anything involving policies, I was born and raised in a very cultural family, very conservative family, born and raised in a Christian home. My parents are pastors of a church. So all those values, I identify myself as a conservative above all, conservative, Republican above all, and then a Trump supporter most of the times. For many reasons, anything from pro-life to conserving our First and Second Amendment, border protection. I hope we could talk about border protection and immigration in this discussion. Capitalism, I'm 100% in favor of capitalism. I think our nation is going into socialism eventually. Joe Biden, he seems to be conservative, but his supporters and some of his possible partners might not be. They're some of radical left, so that worries me a bit. So it's more policies than anything.
I think for me, I really try to take into consideration how politics would affect us as a whole. And so I would definitely agree with taking into consideration how the economy has been doing, how, in addition, how has healthcare overall has impacted during COVID our communities. I also would like to talk about, right now we got a new Supreme Court justice appointed who obviously is conservative. And so how will that actually affect our communities, our women who, are pro-choice, and so I also think that is a big issue that needs to be discussed. I also, when I think about the issues to elect a president, I think about immigration reform, that we have such a kind of antiquated and broken system of immigration that I think needs to be completely changed in order to actually be able to help individuals who are either seeking asylum and see how they can contribute to our community. I agree with Julio that there's so many things that immigrants can contribute to our community. And so I think immigration is a huge issue when we talk about who are we going to elect as our next president. Even climate change and international, public relations and foreign relations. How are we going to deal with the rest of the world and the rest of our partners when we have a president? Currently right now, who is backing away from certain agreements, and so I think when I think about voting and the issues that we're voting on, to whom the president will then represent our population, I think about voting in the conditions that we're in. And so the conditions and the livelihoods that we're in definitely impact who will then be able to represent all these issues.
Thank you, Dira. And Edna?
Well, I'm not going to lie. I have voted on emotion in the past. That I've voted, and that has changed in this year. I was not a Trump supporter in the beginning. I voted for Hillary. I consider myself a liberal conservative. And what that means is that I really didn't find a space for myself in the left or on the right, even though I was raised conservative. There's a lot, I'm very modern when it comes to many, many issues, because I am a mentor. So I hear a lot of stories and a lot of different stories, a lot of backgrounds from different young ladies that come from very different, not only backgrounds, but heritage as well, and scenarios. That being said, as far as what I look in a candidate for presidency, I have learned to be more informed, to be more educated, because I realized that it does affect us. When Trump was elected the first time, like I mentioned, I didn't vote for him because I wasn't a fan of his to begin with. And I didn't understand how the Republican Party could choose someone like him to represent them. However, I'll be the first one to admit that he has made a lot of changes. He has come through with a lot of his promises. As hard as that was able to say out loud, I am a Trump supporter now. Everybody's very confused because a lot of my friends, I'm a philanthropist. I do a lot of community work, and I revolve myself around a lot of Democrats, a lot of left, a lot of liberals. So their mentality was being not pushed on me, but I was being influenced by that. However, what's important to me now, I've learned to be informed and to really research things and find out what was going on, what's happening, what has happened. And that being said, it has opened up my eyes in many different ways. And that's the reason I think differently. However,
it's not about input or output. It's about how to figure out a way to contribute more to the United States. Because I've noticed that Republicans have started to take more, in the era of post-Trump politics, I've noticed that there's a lot of antagonizing of the Latino community in regards to illegal immigration. It's the fact that it's a little bit more humane. It's a little bit, because I feel that we're entering an age of humane politics. So it's that. It has to do a lot with the fact that it doesn't antagonize the immigrant.
Thank you.
And that it gives individuals a possibility.
So let me start off by saying I really hope all the DACA and Dreamers, I really hope DACA gets upheld to begin with. The 11 million illegal immigrants that are here. I really hope they're able to, if they're here, if they're here, they're not committing any crimes. I really hope they can stay here, get some sort of amnesty. I hope our government can work something out. Illegal immigrants, Latinos that are here illegally are a big factor in our economy. Everyone knows that. I think if ICE really wanted to get rid of every illegal immigrant, they would have done it already. If they don't, it's because they know we can't survive as a nation without the illegal immigrants. So what I like about the Republican Party and specific about Trump is he's not against illegal immigration. He's very for legal immigration. He's said it many times. You could come to our country, but do it legally. Why is that important? Why is border protection important for me? Because 1 of every 3 women that cross the border get raped as they're crossing the border. They're coming over expecting and hoping a better life, and they end up getting raped multiple times by multiple men along the way, along the southern border. About 20,000 children a year get crossed through the southern border to eventually get forced into labor or sexual exploitation. So why do we need border protection? Why do we need to make it clear that we are for legal immigration into this country? Is because when we do that, when we have border protection, when we make it clear to other countries, you could come here, but legally, we stop all that suffering on the southern border. We stop all that separation of families in the southern border. 90% of drugs that come into our country are crossed through the southern border. So when I talk about border protection, when I talk about immigration, I'm very for legal immigration. I stand behind DACA and Dreamers, and I really hope the 11 million illegal immigrants that are here currently get some sort of something worked out where they could stay if they're here. They have not committed a crime, and they're going to be here to respect our country, the Constitution, defend it, and love and respect our leaders, regardless of who they are.
Thank you, Freddie. And Yadira?
Yeah, I think obviously I'm definitely within the Democratic Party's alliance. I think what is interesting, what guides me to Biden's approach within immigration is that he definitely is trying to take into consideration what Obama's policies was. He definitely highlights his role in immigration in the Obama administration, or he led the policy in addressing the 2014 wave of unaccompanied minors arriving in the U.S. What I do think is definitely needed, obviously I definitely agree with all the DACA recipients because they are making a difference. I have obviously met personally many people who are within DACA who fight, that are activists, who fight for our community, who are sometimes our own doctors during this time of COVID. And so what I think is more important is overall an immigration reform. I would be totally for coming into the country legally, but it takes years overall just to even get your citizenship status, let alone go through the residency process and then your citizenship status. I think what is hard right now is that we're dealing with a wave of individuals who are seeking asylum, who at this point, legally, they can't even say that they're afraid for their lives, because that doesn't even constitute under seeking asylum anymore. Being afraid for your lives because 1, you are threatened. 2, it could be threatened from gang violence, or just being afraid for your life because there isn't any resources within your country. And I know just even based on the discussion that Biden did have in his recent debate, he was talking about being able to provide aid and resources for those countries to be able to even provide those services for the people that are fleeing those countries. Now, do I think that with regards to immigration, I also think that there should be a reunification of children on the border that are, in cages. Trump does say that they're in clean and sustainable conditions, but there have been documentation that there has been a spike also in COVID-related cases, and that these children are provided the bare minimum. And so I think about one, that the immigration reform needs to be completely redone. I think Biden can take us to that level.
Well, immigration is a very touchy subject. I don't think there's a perfect way of resolving the issue quickly because of so many factors that are included. However, this is something that I'm not fully educated on as far as, sorry, I'm driving here. So that being said, I am learning every day a little bit more about immigration. However, I do know that Trump wants to go ahead and sign the information or the DACA and let all the kids or children that are under DACA to stay here, which is something that I think everybody agrees on. But everybody, as far as everybody in the United States agrees on, however, it needs to be passed. The laws need to be passed. And there needs to be a way where everybody, all the judicial and Congress and everybody works together to get that done. Unfortunately, we all know government acts like children in a playground. Therefore, I don't know how long it's going to take them to come to a sound agreement, because what Obama signed, he knew it was temporary. It wasn't a permanent fix. Why wasn't a permanent fix? Why wasn't there a permanent fix at the time Biden and Obama were in, their administration? How come they didn't fix it? There's a lot of questions, and I don't necessarily blame them for it, because it's a very complex issue. It's an emotional issue that is used against Latinos every single election year. And I hope we are able to come to common ground so we can let all the kids that are under DACA stay here for sure. They're already here. They're contributing. They're making positive impact in our community, in society. And I hope that as Democrats, Republicans, everybody here locally, whether you have a political party or not, that we're able to come to common ground and not argue about it, but talk about it, because I believe both parties have great ideas and the heart in the right place as well.
Thank you. I guess what scares me from Joe Biden is that one debate they were having, Democratic debate, where they were asked how many of you would give free medical or health care to all the illegal immigrants that are here and that will be coming here. And they all raised their hand, including Biden. I think that's pretty scary. I mean, open borders is scary, and giving free things is pretty scary. That's going to overwhelm our economy. We all know that's impossible, and we all know that's pandering, and it's not fair. It's not fair for our Latinos to be promised something. Hey, you're going to come to this country, and it's going to be nice and quick and easy, and you're going to get everything for free. And we all know that's not going to happen ever. So I don't think that's fair for our Latino brothers and sisters that are trying to get here.
But when you think about people coming into the United States, obviously for a better future, I even think about most people, most residents, most citizens don't even have access to healthcare at some points in their lives. So to say that immigrants would come in asking for what some people would consider a handout would be more so necessarily, like a resource that even in the United States, we're struggling to even achieve. Like we are, one of the first world countries that doesn't have a universal health care that is not associated with having a job or a job associated to healthcare. So if you don't obviously have a job, then you're kind of out of luck, or obviously paid into like a Medicaid system. But even then, I feel like many people are out of a loss for even healthcare, or So to me, to say that like an open border would correlate to an impact in our economy and even our healthcare, I think would still kind of negate the fact that We are, even on our own, kind of struggling to even access universal health care.
If so, how has COVID influenced your decision in choosing your political candidate?
The president acted upon the information that he had. And we all acted upon the information that we had. And because the information was changing so quickly every single day, every single week, for work, for, just general public, it really told me that nobody could be as prepared for what was coming. Even though I've heard that the Obama administration left a plan. However, this virus is it's like a lot of other things, other viruses that we have currently, the flu, the, diabetes, heart disease, which I'm a big advocate about. Those things also kill a lot of Latinos on a daily basis. That being said, I am not disappointed in the way the Trump administration handled everything, because we were all learning together, and this was unexpected. I wish that we were not as afraid. Like, we're acting less afraid now than we were in the beginning, but I am not disappointed on the way he handled the situation. I'm happy that they're getting a hold of it now. And if we think about it, none of the other countries were able to prevent it, no matter how prepared, how many lockdowns they had. So that being said, I felt that he has done a good job. The whole administration has done a good job. And it's up to us as well, as the people of the United States, to do our part. We don't do our part, we're not going to control this virus. So it's a community effort. It's just not only on Trump or only on the president or whoever's going to be in charge. It's on all of us, and we all need to do our part for sure. So I'm happy the way it was handled. It's sad, all the deaths and all the suffering that it has caused economically and emotionally. But overall, I believe it was handled the best way it could be handled.
Thank you, Edna. And Julio?
I do agree with the sentiment that Edna shared, saying that it has to do a lot with the micro level community effort, what we do in our city, what we do in our communities, what we do in our neighborhoods. But prior to coronavirus, I was unsure if I was going to vote for Biden, but realizing that there was a delay over how Donald Trump acted, that's what solidified me choosing Biden, because I saw stuff on Twitter about the coronavirus when it was still being played down, when it was supposedly not a bad virus. I remember scrolling through Twitter, and I saw a video where people were just collapsing and they were, coughing up blood. And I remember people telling me, it's not that big of a deal, but I remember saying, no, this is going to be a big deal. And at the age of information, where we have immediate access to information that changes ever so often, I believe that there should have been a sense of urgency since the beginning. Instead of waiting until March to react, I think they should have reacted as soon as they figured it out. And I know there's going to be people that says, he cut off flights from China, but did he do the same with Europe? Most of the cases were from Europe, and he didn't do anything to ensure that there was, limited migration from Europe. So I believe that dependent on all of the consideration and all the factors, he could have done better. But, I feel that he has been playing it down even to this day, by saying if we test less, then there's going to be less cases. It doesn't work like that.
So let me start off by saying I just hate so much how a worldwide pandemic has been politicized, especially for our U.S. elections. Like if anyone had control of this besides China, right? We cannot blame anyone for what's going on other than China. Now, having said that, at one point I was questioning if our government was doing the right thing. But as a conservative Republican, I'm strong and believe the less government invasive we are, the better. We are grown-ups. We should know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. If we don't feel safe going out, you don't go out. You don't need the government to tell you don't go out or go out. If you don't feel safe going to stores or restaurants, don't go to those stores and restaurants. You should be more than fine. So I just really dislike how politicized this has been. If you hear the Biden's campaign, all they talk about is COVID, and blaming the deaths on Trump. Like if it was the president's, the governor's, anyone's fault for what's going on. It is not. It really isn't. I mean, it's a worldwide pandemic. And if it's our president's fault, and then it's also the Mexican president's fault, and so forth, every country's, we're just going to blame their president for it, if that's the case. So I just don't like it being politicized. I think we're grown-ups. For example, I work at a bank, and I was doing everything by the book. I was wearing my mask. I was doing the whole hand sanitizing, keeping my distance, and I still caught the COVID. How? I have no idea. We were learning, and we started learning about COVID, and I don't think we're ever going to know exactly how it works. I mean, we are eventually, but not near. We just have to, as a community, I back what Julio and Edna said. We just have, as a community, to be not be selfish and think about one another and follow what we know so far. And there's people that need to earn their living. I don't like shutdowns. I'm not for shutdowns. There's a lot of people who are losing their jobs, closing their businesses. A lot of suicides, a lot of home violence, sexual violence at home because of the shutdowns and lockdowns. I'm not for that. So COVID has not moved my political needle one bit, because it shouldn't for anyone.
For me, at least, I think any politician would really kind of demonstrate how they would handle very difficult situations in a country. And I think a worldwide pandemic, is something that, to me, definitely shows how a leader will go ahead and, either unite the nation, or kind of even divide it. And I do think that Trump did a horrible job, on my personal opinion, obviously, because one, he definitely denied knowing that a pandemic was coming. He downplayed it. And then there was video recordings that did mention that he knew about the pandemic hitting the United States, yet decided to do nothing in preparation for it. I think, in addition, obviously, there's a total of 200,000 coronavirus deaths in the United States. And I think, for me, the fact that he continues to kind of downplay that it's a serious situation. Obviously, if you are healthy, you'll get coronavirus, and you'll be able to by your own healthily combat it. But if you have any pre-existing conditions, or if you know that you will get sick and know that you do have those conditions, pre-existing conditions, that you can potentially die from this disease. I think, with regards to having enough, PPE, any personal protection, I also think that for example, critiquing the governor of New York, which was a recent critique, in which it looks like a ghost town and it's empty in the last debate, is the fact that New York has been one of the hot zones of coronavirus, and because of their stay-at-home orders and their implementation, coronavirus actually was able to go down. The records of them were able to go down in the state of New York. I think what I looked at in a leader was somebody to be able to unite the United States and be able to do a unified front of how to handle coronavirus, how to be able to offer the support to the community, instead of dividing each state and having them kind of fend for themselves of how each state will go ahead and take care of the coronavirus pandemic on their own. And so it was not a unified front for me. I think it continues to be downplayed even now that we're hitting a third wave. And I think for me, for sure, it's a huge it's a huge thing for me that displays how a leader, in this case Trump, handled the situation. So I think for me, it left to be desired. I would say that.
Thank you, dear. And now for our next question, how does each candidate perform in promoting Latina ownership? And I'd like Freddie to answer this first.
So I love how our president has a slogan, one of many, right? That says promises made, promises kept. And one of those promises that he made, and actually he signed a legislation of, was that $1 billion for Hispanic business owners. Unless you guys know of any other president that has done that recently, President Trump actually promised it and kept his promise and made it happen. He signed a legislation of $1 billion to help Hispanic, Latino business owners. So for me, this rhetoric of, because I get this a lot, oh, Trump doesn't even like you, Trump's a racist. I think actions speak louder than words, His words were taken out of context when he was first running for presidency in his first term. I truly believe I haven't seen an action of his part of being racist. It's actually the other way around. He's helped the Hispanic community, Latino community like no other president. It's on numbers never lie. Literally, numbers never lie. And if you look at the numbers of Hispanic buying homes this year, Hispanic coming out of poverty, Hispanics opening businesses because of the legislation our president has passed and helped. I'm truly grateful for what this our president and the presidency has done for the Latino community.
I do agree, that Trump has done good in actually trying to promote Latino ownership, but we got to realize that executive signatures are an action with no content behind it. I know that sounds pretty harsh, but it's one thing to sign for a plan. It's another thing to implement it. Whether or not he implements it, that's dependent on if he gets elected or not. But I do agree with Freddie that he says that I have not been aware of any other presidents that has actively been trying to help Latino ownership. But you got to divide this question into two. Are we talking about small businesses or are we talking about corporate? Because Donald Trump will always support Latino corporate organizations like Goya. But what about small businesses? I feel like with the coronavirus stimulus, he kind of showed that there's something in between the executive, the federal and the state, because I'm highly involved with a lot of small businesses in my community that are Latino owned, and they didn't get any funds from that stimulus. So are we really sure that, what has been promised is going to be kept? That's for us to figure out. But I am aware that Biden also has a, Latino ownership plan. You could look up on the website, and it's not just about, supporting Latino corporations, but it's about empowering communities through economic empowerment of small businesses. It's about providing, dignity to those individuals who are Latino, who are trying to, achieve their American dream. So in summary, I feel like Donald Trump, has his head in the right place, but we need someone who is more actions than words.
there's a small business, a restaurant. I can't remember the name of it, but I did put it on my Facebook page because I shared it. A restaurant in El Paso, and they were pointed out for being at the Trump rally. They didn't know. They just went and supported Trump. And when they, like, I think it was 1 or 2 days later, where the restaurant owner and his wife were being threatened. People were coming by, throwing things in the parking lot, calling them names and putting bad reviews, all kinds of stuff. And it was other Latinos and other minorities doing this to immigrants that worked really hard for that restaurant, a small business, like many that that I can tell that many of us work with in our own communities. So Donald Trump heard about what was going on. Although he couldn't travel to El Paso, he did put a tweet out and supported that particular business. Just like he did with Goya, he did it with this Mexican restaurant. The moment he did that, all of Trump's supporters flooded that restaurant. That man in the interview, you can tell he's crying. He's very emotional. And I would too. I mean, he gave me goosebumps. At that point, I said, what is going on? Is he that as bad as people think he is? And how come this wasn't promoted in anybody's Facebook, media, radio, or anything? It didn't get any kind of promotion. So that to me, like I said, us Latinos, or as for me, I do get emotional, but then I said, wait a minute, let me look into it. And I saw the video and I shared it on my Facebook. So if he can do that for that one person, and if he's racist, he wouldn't have done it. And if he didn't care, he wouldn't have done it. If he only cared about big businesses, he wouldn't have done it. So that to me, like many of you said earlier, actions speak more than words.
I know one of the big things that Biden is trying to do is implement a higher minimum wage for all individuals, right? All citizens of the United States, and all working individuals. And so right now, at least obviously I can speak for what is going to be here in Colorado. Right now, the minimum wage is $11.10. It'll be $12 come January. In school, obviously, I did a activity to see what is the minimum wage that people need to live by to actually be successful, right? To not just pay for the minimum things. And so $15 obviously is not going to be enough. I think a working minimum wage that helps community is more than that. But at least I think that is something that Biden is trying to implement. He wants to have at least $15 minimum wage. I think in addition, he thinks about nowadays, in order to get some jobs, most individuals have to have at least a degree. And so what I think is important is that Biden is trying to implement like Pell Grants for low-income students. He is offering also community college free for 2 years. And in addition, he is looking into investing at least, $70 billion investment in Hispanic and other minority serving institutions. And so I think there is investment that he wants to make into our Latino community, whether it be through raising the minimum wage, offering, college free for 2 years, increasing Pell Grants for our community so they can actually go to college, have a degree, get a good paying job. I feel like there is, I agree that, yes, he may have implemented some funding for businesses. However, and I need to be a little bit more well-versed into how those whether it be small businesses or whether it be like corporate money that was invested, and how has that impacted today our Latino community. But at least I can see that what is going to be promised by the Biden and Harris presidency, I think it's something that all our community needs and something that can look forward to. So.
Thank you. And Freddie, to respond real quick.
So respectfully, adding to what Yadira just mentioned about increasing the minimum wage, that's actually very, very extremely dangerous to our small businesses, because that's actually our small businesses are gonna just scale back in regards to employment because they're not gonna be able to afford it. So minimum wage is actually not good for small businesses. They're actually going to let go of employees and even increase their item costs. So I don't think that's very healthy for a small business. It could potentially work for large corporations, but for small businesses, increasing minimum wage is death. It's gonna stifle their growth pretty much.
If I can just say one thing, I was with a small business owner today that I'm going to help in promoting their business because they're on the verge of losing their small business because they opened the business about 4 months prior to COVID. And she says she has to be there because she can't afford to pay anyone to work there for her. She has to make her schedule around her kids. And she says, Edna, you came in the perfect time to help me. And just today I was able to bring her three clients, not even using my social media because we do promoting and advertising differently than what people think. But, he does have a point. She can't afford it. She can't afford $7. She can't afford $12. And if it goes up to any higher, she definitely won't be able to afford to employ a teenager that can work weekends.
I mean, I would say respectfully, I can say that I know that it may impact small businesses, and I am for helping small businesses. And Edna, it looks like you were able to help out of your own resources and out of your own networks to be able to help this small business. I also see the other side of the coin where most of our community cannot live out of a minimum wage. And so if it comes to looking at as a whole picture, I think we still need a minimum wage. And if those small businesses are still in need of funding, obviously because we're in a pandemic, it's even harder for them to sustain themselves economically. But if Trump is providing those resources, then I would like to see that come out to play already. If they're already struggling, I would like to see how his stimulus for small businesses is helping them in this time. And what I see right now is that it's not. And I know one of the things that Biden is promising is at least helping small businesses be able to have funding to be able to start up, but in a safe way. Because if we don't do it in a safe way, we can see that it's still going to increase. It's still going to maintain us into being in this COVID economic time. At least we need to think about doing it in safe ways. And if the funding is still needed, then maybe strategize into having a different proportion of our budget. Like our defense budget is insane and it's not going into our community. So all I'm saying is if there is funding, but we need to see where that funding is being allocated. And if it's not into our communities, then where exactly is it going?
Oh, definitely. I agree that there's two sides to everything that we do and to every story and every issue or every law or every scenario. But she was doing great. And I hope that Trump's plan to help small businesses is going to affect and is effective for them. It wasn't very productive around this time, but she was doing very well prior to COVID. So hopefully when the economy goes back up, what's going to happen? She was actually doing very, very well. And like many small other businesses, she was affected by it. So. And
now to our next question. How does each candidate perform in promoting Latina political power?
Well, I'm just going to be upfront. Trump has done a piss poor job in politically empowering the Latinos. But like going over Biden's plan of Latino ownership, beyond just economic, there's also, the fact he is willing to appoint people in his cabinet that are Latinos. He is willing to appoint them as heads of departments, across federal entities. So I feel like as of right now, unless Trump takes a different approach, Biden is doing more to give more Latinos an opportunity to have a voice in government. And a lot of people might say that this is pandering or performative, but I've actually seen seen it firsthand as Biden, even though he doesn't agree with the far left, he allows him to have a seat at the table. Or let's take, for example, Julian Castro. He allows him to, have an opportunity to, say what he feels is right. So I see that Joe Biden as a candidate has, even without a presidential power, has given a lot of opportunities for Latinos to have some sort of, footprint in politics.
Thank you, Julio. Now, Freddie.
So obviously, we all know Trump is not a politician, so he doesn't like to pander. Would I feel proud and would I feel excited to see a Latino, in the cabinet or working near him or with him? Of course I would. But we have to understand, I think he's choosing the most qualified person to do their job. For example, Joe Biden. There were so many other better candidates than Joe Biden, number one. Number two, for vice president, it was such a shame that they were only electing a female and she had to be of color. Why not elect someone who is actually qualified, who has the skills, the talent, and who has experience to be the actual vice president? So when it comes to, Latino, Latina empowerment in political, would I be proud to see someone Hispanic or Latino, Latina in the White House, near the president, with the president? Of course I would. But I would probably feel safer when he's surrounded by people that are actually qualified for the job and not chosen because of the color of their skin or because of their heritage or their last name. So again, I hope we get to the point where we see one day a Latino, Latina in the White House. I really hope so. But I rather hope to see someone who's qualified to lead this nation.
One, I do agree with having people in political spaces and power that are, driven by their education and knowledge, but also by the community. I know that. What I would say is just based on character. I'm just basing it on character and based on what I see. I see that there is obviously a lot of I don't even know how to say it, a lot of anger or a lot of obviously completely different opposing views by already people that are in power. I mean, obviously, for example, we can think about women in power, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar or Ayanna Pressley. Like those are women in power, and I can already tell that there is, a back and forth between the Trump administration and them, because they are wanting, the best for our communities and what they can offer. And so, what do I think that Trump has provided more Latino political power? I would probably say no, just because of just his political agenda. Do I think that Latino political power can increase if he's out of office through a different administration, through Biden? I do think that there would be at least more collaboration. So
thank you, Adiwa. And yeah, Edna?
Well, I definitely agree with Freddie. We're on the same page. We definitely want to see Latinos in power, people that we can relate to a lot more, that understand our culture and our personalities and our heritage, because everybody wants to put us in a melting pot, and we're not a melting pot. We're Mexicans, we're Puerto Ricans, we're Cubans, and so forth. I think that's something that we could all agree on, that Latinos are not being represented in the White House as much as we would like them to be. But I think it's in us to support our local Latino people that run for office. We've done many, many things here locally, here in Texas in the DFW. We're supported Democrats, for example, Raymond here in Fort Worth. Now it's Elva that's going to be going for Fort Worth. And it's important for them to go out there and network. What I see, I do a lot of network where I live, and I don't see them network as much as they should. Maybe they're very busy. Maybe they need to have people networking for them. I don't know. We're missing something, and that's why we're not being represented in the White House. But like Freddie said, we want to make sure that not only because of their skin color, but they know what they're doing and they have their hearts set in the right place so the right decisions can be made for all the Americans.
Just quickly, and I'm not picking on Yadira, but I mean, women have been empowered for a long, long time. I don't think AOC and the backlash she gets is because of her empowerment or any of the actual candidates that are, Congress women that she mentioned. Women have been empowered. And do they need to be more empowered? Absolutely. There should be equity, equality. But the backlash that AOC gets is definitely not because she's a woman. I can tell you that.
And I agree. I agree that it's not because she's a woman. I think that, in my honest opinion, is that she does bring good views and strategies to the table that sometimes, push people to think about differently. And I honestly think that sometimes it rattles the cages of things that are done, that have been done the same way for many years in Congress and in politics. And so I don't think it necessarily has to be with her being a woman. I think it has to do with the issues that she's bringing to the table.
Perfect. So now for our next question, what are the solutions that each candidate have to promote equity in the specific Latina community?
That both parties have failed to include, voices of the Latinos when formulating their plans or agendas. So first and foremost, they need to make sure that there's an input, from the people that they're trying to serve. That's first and foremost. Second, I feel like, there needs to be a unbiased, committee, where it's both, Republicans and Democrats to, actually go out and find solutions to the things that, affect us as Latinos. So I feel like right now Biden, his approach and having more input from individuals is a good starting point. So I believe that we need not to be pandered, but we need to be listened to authentically, not just during election seasons, not just during midterm elections. It has to be a year-round effort from each candidate and from both parties. They can't be spewing rhetoric and then 3 months before, do something performative. It has to be an authentic engagement. So I feel like each candidate, to promote equity, they have to be more sincere in their actions.
I do believe we have a long road ahead of us when it comes to the Hispanic Americans here in the United States. I know that they're making a strive, but like we said, it comes down to what do we, the people, want. We have to bring that to our local mayors, our governors, so it can be raised up to all the way to the White House. Because if we're not being represented, like we spoke about earlier, then they don't know what our needs are. I don't know who they're speaking to, what they're doing as far as that goes. I'm not as informed as maybe Freddie or everybody on the other panel. Like I mentioned, when I was not a Trump supporter, I ignored the news. I did many things wrong, and now I'm trying to correct them, trying to get educated and, learn a little bit every single day. But what I do know is that there is a long road. We're not being represented. And just like somebody else mentioned earlier, I heard something about, listen to what we want, listen to what we really need. And I think that's going to be a long road before we get to where we really have to be. But we have to start somewhere. So we have to have our voices heard. And we as U.S. citizens have to do something about it, not just sit here and complain about it.
Thank you, Edna. And Freddie?
Yeah, I think equity and equality of minorities, and especially talking about obviously Latinos, it starts from within. I think in our popular culture now, us Latinos are very tribalist. we are more loyal to our social groups than anything else, or above everything else. And that itself is making us be not part of America in a weird sense. It's hard to explain because, for example, I'm Latino, Hispanic, and I come out, as a conservative Republican voting for Trump, and then I get excluded by my own people. So how can there be equity or equality from our government if our own Latino communities are derogatory and racist to each other? So I think that equity and equality starts amongst us in our social groups, understanding that before there was tribes, and now we're not in a tribalism country. It's a democracy. We're all Americans, regardless from where we come from. And when we start taking out those pronouns and titles, and we just call each other Americans, that's when we're going to be truly see equality amongst America. And the least that we try to exclude ourselves from the rest is when we're actually, I think, we're going to see the most equity in regards to government and society.
So I think one of the things that could have provided equity and inclusion for all communities, not just Latino communities, all communities of different races and ethnicities, was, for example, the HEROES Act. I don't know if you guys have heard of the HEROES Act in Congress, which would have, paid for the emergency supplemental, like PPE, would have given the additional direct payments of $1,200 per individual, paid sick day leaves, paycheck protection program, funding for essential workers, tax credit deductions, it eliminates cost of share, so many things that it would have done for our community. And one of the things that I continue to see within just the Trump administration, and even just within our own House of Representatives and Senate, was that this bill was continued to be pushed down. And every time that this bill that would have included equity for many communities then came back around closer to, I think it was September, and they said, well, we don't want to look at the entire picture. We want to just pay people money, which is great. We need money to be able to supplement our income because we're suffering right now during the pandemic. But the House of Representatives came back and said, okay, well, we'll do, at least the minimum of the $1,200 plus, and we want to include ITIN numbers so people can get that additional supplemental income. And then, the president came back and were like, no, we just want to give out this paycheck. And so I feel like when I think about at least the administration and what Trump has done, but it goes beyond that, right? It goes what's going on in the House and the Senate, is that we're not really taking into consideration the equity and the inclusion of even the bills and the policies that are being pushed forward, that I feel that is needed. And I feel that we can't, for some reason, we can't reach that with Trump. And so I'm hoping that with at least a different administration under Biden and Harris, that at least these bills would be taken into consideration as a whole, and not just one area that can be paid out to our community or for our resources for our community. So
self-responsibility is a big concept in the conservative and capitalist discourse. My question to the conservatives here, how would you describe self-responsibility when it comes to low socioeconomic communities, your Latin American country of origins, or the world as we are living in a climate change crisis?
Capitalism it could be very selfish at times. It really can. I think as a conservative Republican, sometimes I caught myself having very selfish thoughts where, this is what I've earned. This is what I want to keep. I don't know if I'm going in the area that you're expecting the answer, Francisco. But what I'm trying to say is capitalism can be very selfish at times, and selfish of those in need, Capitalism can be selfish at times if we don't manage it correctly. Yes, of our ecosystem and of other countries. So I believe in a very balanced capitalism where we don't forget about those in need, but not in a sense where we need to support them for the rest of their lives. When I was younger, my family was on welfare, for example, and we understood welfare was just temporarily. It was a temporary relief. It was not a permanent retirement plan per se. So in regards to capitalism and the way I feel about, the way capitalism should be managed or handled is, if you want to have something, you have to earn it and you have to work for it. And whatever you work for, you get to keep. I don't believe that you need to necessarily share that against your will with others to have equity. Talking about equality in economics. I'm a strong believer of capitalism. I really despite socialism, just because, again, and it sounds very, very selfish, but what you work for is yours and you get to keep it. And if you want to be, given and you want to give to the ones that you need, including to people here in the United States or outside the United States, and then that's at your own will, at your own heart. I personally, as a Christian, we do a lot of social and social help, and we go out and help others, and we give from our salary, we give for example, our 10%. So as a capitalist, I'm not against giving to others, helping others. I just think it has to be a very balanced capitalism where we understand what's yours is yours. And if you want to give some to others, and then it's at free will, and you shouldn't be forced by the government to help others or have inequity in our economy.
Well, we all have seen prior to COVID how many businesses, small businesses, big businesses, were being very successful in their own right. As far as the responsibility for other countries, every country decides what they're going to do with their own country. The right, they're going to be communist, they're going to be in capitalism, and it's their right. They should, because they live in that country. That's why Venezuela is the way it is, Denmark is the way it is, and it's a decision that the country has to make on itself and then suffer the consequences, whether it be good consequences or bad consequences. But every country, what I see, every country does what they feel is best for their country, just like every household does it. So, but as far as where the country comes in, it's a bigger picture. It's just not like your household. It's not, and it's in a smaller scale. I believe that the United States does have a responsibility to other countries to an extent, but just like James Jordan Peterson said, you have to take care of your own home and make right in your own country, in your own home, before you go out and start, fixing everybody else's problems or helping everybody else in their problems.
To the Democrats now, with how Democrats who are in ties with the prison industrial complex, U.S. imperialism, and an inhumane immigration system, why continue to support them every 4 years? And would creating a third party be an option?
That the industrial complex is funded by many corporations and even funded through our banks. So I think, and this is what I've done personally, I for sure know that the industrial complex is just another form of keeping people oppressed, of not really allowing people to even go through a fair trial. Because sometimes people of color are not even trialed with the same thought process or the same advantages of other people, particularly white people. I particularly choose not to purchase or at least make business with other banks that go into the industrial complex, the prison industrial complex. So I think for me, it starts with knowing if you are paying into these prisons, for example, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, I think U.S. Bank also does that. Different banks pay into this prison industrial complex. So I think just being mindful of that. I think what also comes into play is how PACs or super PACs donate money to different political parties or different candidates. And so I think taking certain money that can advance certain political stances can muddy the waters, because they're paying, right? They're paying for how they want you to act within a democracy. And that is not a democracy. You're paying into what you want. And I don't think that's okay. So I think, one, for Democrats in general, and for any politician in general, I think you need to be mindful of how you are receiving your money, because you're paying into the leadership. You're paying into being president. And so I think that's one of the things. How is U.S. imperialism and an inhumane immigration system? So why continue to support that every 4 years? I think when we think about imperialism and an inhumane immigration system, I think when we talk about, when we think about capitalism and trading and all that comes with it, I do have to say that sometimes, within the United States, we want things faster, we want things cheaper, we want things to be convenient. And so I think, at least personally for me, I think being aware of how we are taking advantage of other countries, taking advantage of other people's labor, I think for me comes into play. So I think being able to at least provide them that decency or those human rights, to not be in sweatshops, to be able to not go into that imperialistic ideals, for me at least, I think it's something that needs to, for me, also comes into like who then I would choose as a leader.
Well, as long as there's corporate interests within the upper elite, I feel like self-responsibility is something that will slowly start diminishing even more as we progress. And as for voting for Democrats because of their ties with the prison industrial complex, this is the only time that I will be voting Democrat unless there is a Democratic candidate who is actually qualified to lead. But as of now, for me, it's for Trump to not be in office, because I feel like his skill set is better suited as probably the Department of Small Businesses, or like his skill set is somewhere else in the government. It's not as the face of the United States. So I will not be voting unless there's an even more qualified candidate within the Democratic Party that does not have ties to the prison industrial complex. As for another party, I think that's not just one. I feel like we should have a variety. We should have, 5, because what I call the Trump Republicans came out of Democrats going far left. So I feel like we need to be able to have a far left party, a centrist party, a far right party, right, left. We should be able to have a choice, but it goes beyond that. It goes beyond the choices we have. It goes to the system we have. And I feel like we are in an outdated system, and we need to possibly consider ranked choice voting as the possible way to combat this two-party struggle.
With that said, that is all the time that we have. Thank you all for joining us. And for everyone at home, make sure you like the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on all our social media outlets at Latin Entertainment_presents. That is Latin Entertainment_presents. Also, you can listen to us on various podcast platforms that vary from Anchor, Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Podcasts, just to name a few. Lastly, watch out for our next episode on the presidential election, the post-results discussion. See you on the next episode as Latin Entertainment presents Conversamos.
Yeah, yo, is it that wrong? I'm making a song, I'm taking it back for the platform that I formed. You should chop it and transform. I run the reservoir, the predator, like a hungry carnivore. When I'm breaking through these heavy doors, this is Desert Storm. A metaphor to show I'm equipped and informed. I'm striking with the mega force, I'm lukewarm. Your crew